Welcome to an hour of power. I am Keith Anthony Blanchard, spiritual teacher, musician, author of the best-selling book Homecoming: Crossing the Bridge to the Soul, and your host of Center of Light. Let's dive in. Welcome to Center of Light. Good to see you, Keith Anthony Blanchard here. The theme for the year, my dear, let's be clear. You got to be clear. You don't have to be, but you can choose to be. And when you choose that, the results come in magnanimous, stupendous, ridiculous ways that you can only dream about. It's time to get dreaming. What are you dreaming about? Beautiful things, or you having nightmares on any level? Eyes open or eyes closed. And when we think they're open, there's a part of us that still sleeps. When do we ever truly wake up? Is it going on forever? How crazy is that? It's a beautiful ride. When you live in the current of infinite bliss, you don't want it to ever end. See what I'm saying? Welcome to Center of Light, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement. Strap in, brothers and sisters, astronauts, as we launch for inner space. Tonight, my guest is Sylvia True, and we're going to be speaking about her fantastic, powerful, multi-whatever selling book. Let me get it. I've actually been struggling with keeping this name. Maybe it's something I need to look at. Where the madness lies. Lies, as in a bed where it lies, or deception, as in lies. Pretty powerful double entendre there. I did post some links to Sylvia's work, her overview, her website, as well as where you can find her. I think it's the #1 bestseller. She will correct me, I'm sure. Either way, check out the book regardless if it's not. Bestsellers, you doing your best to sell yourself in a powerful way that changes people's lives. Either way, where the madness lies, there are links in this forum as well as to my new bestseller. Shame on me. I don't have my book to show you, but you know the dance. If you bought Homecoming: Crossing the Bridge to the Soul, please use that same hyperlink to go to Amazon to leave me a review. Now would be the chance to do just that. Let me tell you about my guest tonight. Let's get down to some Center of Light Radio beeswax. Tonight, my guest is Sylvia True, Where Madness Lies. Germany, 1934. I hope I get these names and these terms correct. Rigmor, a young Jewish woman, is a patient at Sonnenstein, a premier psychiatric institution known for their curative treatments. But with the tide of eugenics and the Nazis' rise to power, Rigmor is swept up in a campaign to rid Germany, powerful intention, of the mentally ill. USA 1984. Sabine, battling crippling panic and depression, commits herself to McLean Hospital. But in doing so, she was unwittingly agreed to give up her baby. Wow. That brings a few people into my experience and to heart. Linking these two generations of women is Inga, who did everything in her power to help her sister, Rigmor. Now with her granddaughter, Sabine, Inga is given a second chance to free someone she loves from oppressive forces, but both within and without. This is a story about hope and redemption, about what we pass on, both genetically and culturally. It's about the high price of repression and how one woman who lost nearly everything must be willing to reveal the failures of the past in order to save future generations. With chilling echoes of our time, Where Madness Lies is based upon a true story of the author's own family. Wow. Everyone, please welcome Sylvia True to Center of Light.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you
Hi.
so much for having me. And thank you for writing your book, Homecoming, which I am not quite finished with, but was very caught up in it. And I will absolutely leave a review. It's beautiful. And it's a gift. You wrote a gift.
Thank you. And likewise, when I do my shows, as everyone says, and I love the compliments, and I'll always take them. Please give me more. I love that I put all this time and it gets validated to me. But what I do to my guests, I don't know if they notice this, but when we look at you and I screen and this screen, and this screen. This is the mountain range from that era.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So I see that you play in this field as well. You play passionately
Yes.
and sincerely.
Yes.
Wow. Let's dive right in. How do you want to lead off into this wonderful bestseller? When did this book go live? When was it published?
Monday, 2 days ago.
Did it reach #1 or bestseller?
No, but you know what? When you were saying that, I was like, oh, maybe he's manifesting that. Is that possible?
Mm-hmm. It came into my perspective, my conscious stream as a selection, and I chose it. Felt good. I liked it.
Okay, good. Oh, I'm glad you did.
So what age, when you and I were in the green room, I know sort of what your book is about in your lineage, but there's a very strong spiritual aspect of you as well. Obviously, how can there not be? But, we were talking about Mother Mira and this kind of consciousness. So when did that engage for you to understand, even possibly, and please hear my heart correctly, some of the karma that lies throughout time that certain groups of people had some serious bad ways? When did this all sort of awaken for you?
So for me, and it is also reflected in the book. But for me, I had sort of this, I don't know, awakening. It was really, I finally got well. I had struggled with mental illness. So the book is in part my grandmother's journey, in part my great aunt's journey in Nazi Germany, and my grandmother was also Nazi Germany. And then my journey later on, when I was around 25, I wasn't doing well. I hadn't been doing well for years with depression and severe panic. And I couldn't manage, but my family had always been of the belief, pull up your socks, fake it till you make it, you're fine, don't be weak. And I didn't know what to do. So I thought, I know what will fix this. I'll have a baby. Well, it's not really the fix for a lot, although it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But shortly after I had my daughter, I ended up in a mental hospital, McLean, which was the one referenced in the blurb of the book. And I really got better. And a lot of it had to do with my grandmother sharing her difficulties and her story and what really happened in my family and what was hidden for many, many years in my family. So in McLean, I actually did real psychotherapy, which nobody does anymore. I mean, I was in 5 days a week for years. I wasn't in McLean for years. I was only there for a few months. But anyway, I got much, much stronger and came out of McLean ready to figure out what the world was about. I was open. I was curious. I was well for the first time. I think I had had depression probably my whole life. And just tried to hang on. I always had that feeling like I was just walking on a tightrope and just about ready to fall off. And then I did obviously fall off, which was the best thing that happened. So it was after McLean that I met a friend, and he told me his mother was psychic. And I come from this line of very intense scientists, right? I mean, sort of quite a few atheists, but intense scientists. And it was not allowed in my family to believe in such nonsense, right? But I was curious. And first I was like, no, that's not true. That doesn't exist. But I wanted to hear more stories. I love stories. I love reading, sharing, hearing. So I went to my friend's mother. Her name was Sophie. And I was blown away. That was the beginning of sort of my spiritual journey. She was a psychic. She also was able to connect with spirits, although she didn't do that much. And it's funny because I look back at my journey and I knew right away, I couldn't believe what she knew. And I have so many stories from her, but it took me years before I went from, believing in psychics to believing in mediums. I was like, oh, psychics are real, but mediums aren't. And then I realized, well, that's kind of ridiculous. All of this is out there. And then I did a tremendous amount of research, including visiting many mediums, but I also did a lot of reading, especially all the stuff in University of Virginia And then, Mother Mira, I'm a follower of Mother Mira's. So, that opened just a beautiful world to me. And, I love that journey that I've been on. So I'm a writer, but I'm also a chemistry teacher. So the science still runs strong. And I sort of like to look at these things with a scientific eye as well. And in fact, I'm the head of the science department where I teach. I've been teaching for many years. And we call ourselves now the Science, Technology, and Paranormal Studies Department, because I have pulled in my fellow science teachers and gotten them curious and interested and open to all kinds of other things. So I feel fortunate. So I have this writing life, a teaching life, a science life, a grandmother life. So there's a little bit and a lot about me. A mental illness life. Maybe that's too much to just blurt out there. I don't know, Keith.
I love your honesty. I love it. That's a lot. You're very well rounded. You're very well grounded. And I think that when you can handle such multitask, and they're all balanced, that's definitely, you have to be grounded to be able to do such magical things. You become a magician. Let's move deeper into your book. Where Madness Lies is a story about the high price of repression in Nazi Germany. What is all that about and how that relates to you, your grandmother?
Yeah. So I do think this has a spiritual aspect too. I think repression, maybe the wrong word, but I think it can be very dangerous, and the cost is really high in families. So what happened is my grandmother in Germany, it was around 1933-ish, and her sister, who she absolutely adored, her sister's name was Rigmor, was mentally ill. And her sister was extremely talented and brilliant. And I think when I've pieced together the history, finally, I mean, it sounds like she had, depression with psychotic tendencies, although at the time, she was initially diagnosed with hysteria and then melancholy, and then finally she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, because a lot of people were diagnosed with that during that time. So my grandmother did everything she could. I mean, she studied, she got the best doctors for her sister, but things in Germany were taking a real huge turn. Eugenics was huge. In 1933, the Nazis came out with their sterilization law. And between 34 and 39, they sterilized 400,000 people. Anyway, so as my grandmother tried her best, ultimately it failed. And Rigmor ended up in an institution. And in Germany around that time, the mentally ill were euthanized. So the sterilization sort of went to the euthanasia. And my grandmother fled to Switzerland. And she really repressed it. I mean, she put it away. She compartmentalized it to survive. She lost everything in Germany, her social status, her money, her sister, her husband. So really, in order to survive, she kept that in a box, and she tried to control everything. Little things, like in her house, every clock had to go off at exactly the same second every day, on the hour. I mean, she didn't have OCD. It was really post-traumatic stress, and that's how she coped. And the way she coped when she raised her daughter, and then me as well, we had to act as if we were perfect. We could never behave as if there was anything wrong with, especially mentally, although I had no idea why. It was this big secret. So those things that get repressed, they come out in anxiety, in extreme anxiety and fear. And I think children feel that fear and anxiety, which happened to me most of all, and to my siblings to some degree. So that's the power of repression when it gets passed on. So meanwhile, I've become this totally open book, so I can't pass it on to my children.
It's like a shaken Coke bottle.
Yes, it is.
With the cap on. And when you crack that sucker open, if it has any possible opportunity to release some of the pressure, like with your grandmother, who she wasn't this, she found ways to release some of this stuff. I mean,
right.
And otherwise you feel like you're going to pop.
Right. I think that's a perfect analogy. I'm gonna steal that from you.
And we call it soda pop,
Yeah.
right? What did the Nazis do to the mentally ill?
So, as I just said, in
That was the major part of it.
uh, so it's yeah, it was sterilization, and then basically the one way to think about this is I think that the way they treated the mentally ill was really the Nazis' opening act in many ways when you look at it, because it started with a sterilization, but then it went to a whole euthanasia program. And, they identified the victims. They built gas chambers. There were 6 major mental institutions where they built the gas chambers. And they gassed the patients, and they cremated them, and they pillaged the bodies. They absolutely did everything that they would then bring to the concentration camps. And in fact, the doctors of those mental institutions were the same doctors that were used to build the gas chambers in the concentration camps. And I think a lot of people don't know that piece of the history, but it was really their opening act, what they did to the mental patients. And another sort of interesting, well, I think it's very interesting, but people who were considered mentally ill or defective, it was a huge range of things. Feeble-mindedness was their number one term they used, and but there was manic depressive and congenital deafness and blindness and schizophrenia, even alcoholism. So a lot of people were lumped into this category of defective. And it wasn't just the eugenics part was all over the world. In fact, America was sort of leading in sterilizations initially. Obviously, the Nazis took everything to the kind of obscene end, but that part was believed throughout the world that we should get rid of diseases, and the way to do that, many people, biologists, believed was through sterilization at that time. So
it hurts hearing it. It hurts, and I think it should, to a degree, of that you do it consciously. Follow the river to the soul of that said hurt, pain, grief, to allow that something magical to flower. This is something very real to you. I'm reading one of your bullet points because I sometimes really like reading bullet points because it's a way of me bringing out of the author, of the guest, what it is that describes their work, their heart, and their passion. This is something very real to you, something that had great repercussions in your life. Now, in Where Madness Lies, the names have been changed, and some of the details or how you imagined them, but the bones of the story, the insides are true. I would rather you just untap and unravel that.
Yeah, unravel. That's a lot.
Thank you.
So basically what I described happened in Germany with my grandmother, and her sister happened. And then what happened to me later on in the United States after I had my first child, Erica, and I was in McLean, that happened too. There are parts of the story in Germany that weren't fully revealed to me. So you have to understand, a lot of people who fled from Nazi Germany at that time, they kept these things hidden. Both my parents actually fled from Frankfurt, both sides of the family. So this was not something that was ever talked about in my family. It was basically not allowed. And the reason it was eventually talked about was because I went into a mental hospital. So what happened to me is, after I got sick and I ended up in McLean, my mother and grandmother were really too frightened initially to talk to me. And it took them a little while to begin to open up. And when I first went in, all the doctors, they ask you, one of the standard questions, is there any mental illness in your family? And I was like, absolutely not. My family's perfect, except for me. I'm shameful and dark and weak and all those other things, but nobody in my family has ever been mentally ill. So when my grandmother came and slowly sort of revealed the past, it really freed me in so many ways. First of all, I wasn't alone. this did exist. I wasn't crazy. I had felt this fear and this depression that ran in my family my whole life. So, it really connected me. And she, it was a gift that she gave me. And the other sort of really important part of the story to me is that when the grandmother and the granddaughter, me, eventually start really opening up, they finally have empathy for each other, right? And it's that empathy that really leads to a loving relationship that they've never been able to have. And I believe that's true in almost any relationship, right? I mean, when we finally sit down and listen to each other and begin to understand each other and understand where our fears and our shame actually come from, then there's healing. And I know this.
Let me interrupt you there.
Yes.
From your learnings as a spiritual teacher, as well as a student, and all that's good. Where would you suggest that we can look where that comes from? That thing you just described. Where does it come from?
Where does?
Did you say grief or
fear?
Was fear?
Fear and shame.
Shame. That's the word I'm looking for. Where did you found it's come from? From what?
That's such a great question.
Yeah, it's right to the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got me excited. That's why I want to interrupt you.
Okay. I mean, I think it comes from different places for different people. So in my family, there was a tremendous need to not only be mentally well, but to be physically well. And also because of a number of intellectuals in my family, you had to do, incredibly well at school. If you weren't in the top of your class, that was something to be ashamed of. If you were, as my father always said, I was oversensitive, as if that was a terrible thing. I mean, think about it. Like, we should be oversensitive. That's a wonderful thing. But, if I felt things too strongly, I was shamed. I was told not to feel that. I was told I had to, pull up my socks, get better grades. So, my grandmother, she was such an interesting character. And I mean, she hated my hair. It was too frizzy and too curly, and, I had to tame my hair. And my table manners, we were scolded for our table manners. So there was a lot of shame that was passed on in order to really, the whole goal was to look perfect so we wouldn't be killed by the Nazis. I mean, it sort of goes back to that. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I want to acknowledge what you're saying by, let me see if I can get her name, Pureway Prihapakuku, a tribe member. Today is her birthday, and she says, I am literally crying. I can't believe this, quad exclamation point. And there's my answer I need to believe again. Stay blessed. So, I love you changing lives with your beautiful, powerful story. Tell me about how your grandfather, if you have any stories, was the doctor of Anne Frank's family. How cool is that?
That was
right.
He was a wonderful man. Now, my grandfather, that was on my father's side. So both my parents, believe it or not, fled from Germany, both from Frankfurt. And my grandfather was the doctor of Anne Frank and her family before they fled to Amsterdam. And my grandfather was one of these kind, truly kind, gentle souls. And he was literally had to be pushed onto one of the last trains out of Germany because he did not believe that people would do what they eventually did. It was impossible for him to believe that humans would do this to each other. And, and it's hard for many of us, I think, in all times. It's just so difficult to believe that we have that capacity to be so cruel and horrible.
So what did your family have to do to survive? I remember many years ago that I went to some sort of museum, and the story, at least in one of these particular displays, was told that many, many people died in Russia by the hands of the Nazis to
Okay.
some ridiculous number, like 27 million, whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. One is too many. That what they had to do to survive, they would literally peel the plaster off the walls and make some sort of soup to have. God knows what kind of whatever they dressed it and did to make it. What did your family have to do to survive through? I can't even imagine, really.
So I think both my families were extremely fortunate in that they got out. My father's family made it out barely in time. I mean, my father was a really interesting man. He died about almost exactly a year ago. He was a theoretical nuclear physicist. And when he was in Germany, he was a young boy and he was badly beaten and, bullied and whatever, because he was a Jewish boy who wore glasses and they wouldn't let him wear his glasses and they failed him on everything. But anyway, he did make it out, and as did my mother. My mother's family went to Switzerland. And I mean, what they did to survive emotionally, I think, is so interesting. My father dove into the intellectual. He wasn't just a scientist, he was an expert in everything, in history, in opera, but it was all intellectual. Like, the emotions he tried to push away. They came out in not such wonderful ways. Like, he would come home from work and scream and yell, and it never made any sense. Like, the curtains weren't closed properly, and so we'd all try to close the curtains, but it didn't matter. There would be some other silly little thing. So the emotions, again, it's like your analogy with the soda pop bottle. But he wasn't in touch with those emotions. And if you asked him what his childhood was like in Germany, he would have said it's wonderful. And, clearly it wasn't wonderful. And my mother, the way she survived was when she was very young, the doctor said she had weak ankles. And so the doctor said she should skate. And she took to skating from the age of 4 or 5, I think. And she never stopped. She just never stopped. She became Swiss national champion skater. And really it was the physical that saved her, the movement, the constant movement. So, again, all the, a lot of the emotions were tucked away. And it wasn't until I went into McLean and sort of pulled everybody into the light. Well, if you want to call it light, right? And we actually, it was a great awakening of sorts to, because the whole family sort of had to figure out what was all going on. And we all had our different, roles that we played, and to sort of illuminate those was really amazing. And I feel very blessed and fortunate. And it's very important to me to also talk about mental illness in that, because I'm a teacher and I'm a mother and whatever, there's much less stigma, but there's still stigma. And I think it's really important that we talk about it and that everybody knows there's hope and there's.
So do we inherit mental illness? Didn't one of your articles recently suggest this?
I think in my family there was a strong genetic trait. I think that it varies. When I went to college, I remember this was a long time ago, but we were taught, about 80% of who you are is genetic and 20% is, no, sorry, wrong way. Scratch that, erase that. About 80% is environmental and 20% is inherited. And I think that's changed, although I don't think anybody has an exact percentage, but clearly with all the research, more and more people understand that there are genetic components. I mean, there are genetic components to things like alcoholism. Is that the only way you become an alcoholic? Obviously not. So, I mean, but in my family, there's a clearly strong genetic predisposition. I have 2 daughters. They both inherited some aspect. One is more depressed, the other is more panicked. But when my eldest daughter started showing symptoms, I didn't try to hide it like what happened to me in my family. No, I went full force. I found the psychiatrist, the therapist, and the psychic, and she had to see all of them.
Are you of the idea I'm assuming, of the idea that I understand genetics, that we inherit certain things. Is it possible that the inheritance we really get is not necessarily the genome code, it's the belief structure and this
No.
belief system that's passed down lineage after lineage, which organizes said codes and tracks to bring about things? Yeah. I just had to ask that question. I knew you were going to say yes.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're doing a lot. You're talking about epigenetics.
Well, just for example, if my family, let's just say whoever's family has a history of heart disease, and I understand it gets locked into the the DNA code that heart disease is going to be passed down to my children and so forth. But what about the thought process that one takes on to create heart disease within their system, and a belief structure, a belief system that's passed down, and in their belief system, hardening of the heart, for example, people get heart attacks. They're closed in the heart. You see what I'm saying? This level of how inheritance actually happens. In other words, if someone has mentally illness, not only does it get passed down genetically in a physical capacity, but it also gets passed down in a belief system. Would you say?
Yeah, and so there are a couple things here I'm pulling apart, but there's a whole new field that I don't know a ton about, but it's fascinating, about epigenetics. And basically the idea is that, yeah, those beliefs sort of somehow get encoded in your genes, and they alter that. So then that becomes part of your genetics. Again, that's pretty new, and I don't know a ton about it, but it's fascinating stuff. And I absolutely think we pass down, other things, more importantly, other things aside from our DNA. I mean, the way we live and, our general openness. I mean, I wish you could meet my daughter right now, because she's, I passed this openness down to her, and, I think that is certainly being passed down to my granddaughter. So
Broke the curse.
yeah. Well, no, it actually,
Yeah.
and that happens when people go, it's funny. I'm not alone in this at all. It does happen when, one family member like kind of cracks, if I can say that. I don't know if that's the right word, but then the others, there is this like coming to terms with it all, so yeah, I was the one that broke the silence in a way.
What about this paranormal layer aspect, dimension of your book? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, being a science teacher, you wouldn't think this, maybe, and my students love this about me, by the way, my chemistry students. I'm a huge believer in the paranormal, and it was a very important layer for me to put in the book for a number of reasons. First of all, there's a character in the book that has visions of my grandmother's sister, and she sees her clearly. And what it does to my grandmother, it pushes on her boundaries. It makes her uncomfortable initially, but then it makes her just begin to open up about it a little bit. Like, is there that possibility that these people who have died are still with us? And that's an important moment for that character in the book. And then later, she also has a vision of her sister. And, the reader might question, well, is it because, at this point the grandmother's sort of ill? Is it because of that? But I think it's pretty clear, like there's a spiritual component that, again, sort of ties both the grandmother and the granddaughter together in the end. And it's the spirit of Rigmor. So that's very important to me in pushing the characters to be open. I always say this to my students, only a closed mind is certain. And I think that in the book, my grandmother's character had a very closed mind. And through the process of helping me, she had to become more open. And it's that openness that is so important, that curiosity, and that that for me has been like another huge journey in my life, is the curiosity and the open-mindedness into the paranormal. And that didn't happen to me until after I got out of McLean, but it's been a hugely important part of my life. So that's sort of a
I
long.
love what you said, something I say all the time. Infinite possibility. When you hunker down on an idea, it's solid and you're right. It simply just makes you right. But when we live in infinite possibility, then we can right ourselves in a form of balance. That everything happens, because even in the paranormal world, or even the supernatural world, or your normal world, it's like we hunker down in these models, these modalities, these ideas, and we make ourselves right. You and I were talking in the green room about the possibility, or are you soon to be writing another work or doing another work? You want to tell me something about that?
So after I don't remember if I said this to you in the green room or after I got out of McLean, um, I started seeing a psychic. A friend of mine had said his mother was psychic. I said that was absolute rubbish. We don't, in our family, we're too good for that. We don't believe in that nonsense. Okay. So I saw her and I obviously knew right away there was something there. It just blew me away. And she read, her name was Sophie. She died a little over a year ago. And she read regular cards. She didn't read tarot cards. And I don't know if you know this, regular cards were not initially playing cards. They were designed to read fortunes. And over the years, she just was the most incredible mentor. I mean, I saw her at least once a week for 30 years. And she really opened my mind to many things. And especially I remember when my mother was dying, she told me that my grandmother and grandfather who had passed would be at my mother's side. And the reason she told me is that my mother would have these moments of real fear when she wouldn't see them there. And I had to tell her and, remind my mother that they would be there when it was time for my mother to cross. And at that time, I didn't know how much I believed in the spirit world. I was absolutely sure that psychics existed because I knew Sophie, and the stories I have are just, they're crazy and they're really remarkable. And then I started believing in more things in the spirit world, and especially mediums. My oldest daughter calls me the medium hunter because I would go anywhere to see mediums. And sadly, and this is another part of the story, I mean, I did unfortunately bump into some pretty big frauds. And all I can say right now about the frauds is that in a way, for me, they almost legitimized the real people, because it was so clear, when there were frauds. And one of my colleagues, another chemistry teacher, and I, we did a sting on some guy. It was not something I'm proud of, but I'm glad I did. So it's fascinating. And then I started reading all about past lives, and I haven't really had any past life regression therapies, but I would love to try that. I've done a lot of reading at the University of Virginia. They have some unbelievable researchers there, and their work is phenomenal.
Let's go completely right field. How are your dreams? Do you have them? Or are you lucid? Tell me if you want to explore that.
How are my dreams?
Nighttime experiences when you close your eyes and fall in.
So I definitely have had visits. Um, I from my parents, actually, more than anybody. Shortly after my mother died, I had just the most vivid dream of her coming back basically to help me raise my children. I mean, it was a dream, but it wasn't a dream. I mean, I knew that she was there. I've had some really, really fascinating dreams that have really helped direct me, I think.
What would you like people to take from your work and your experience? And I don't know if I could. One thing that really disturbs me, I am not an active fear kind of person. One thing that disturbs me is always the well-being of my son. I guess I'm one of those who follow the model that you need to make sure that you pass before your child kind of thing. Maybe it's the Catholic in me. What do you want people to glean from your experience and what it's like to be human this go around?
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying about your son. It's the natural order, right? You know, that is the natural order. The parents should die before the children. But what I would love is um, for people to feel the progression of sort of the darkness into the light, from the closed offness into the openness. And finally, when these characters can really relate to each other and finally open up and understand and have that empathy, then there's healing and then there's true love. And really, for me, life is all about love. I know that sounds really cliche, but, and I don't mean like romantic love. I know that's important too, but, you know, really loving and understanding. And, you know, look at the world right now and our country and how divided we are. And just, we're so angry and we're
It
so,
hurts.
yeah, we're so ready to point fingers and we're so ready to blame and we're not ready to listen. And if we could listen to each other and understand where we're coming from, you know, and that we're all human, you know, and we all have these fears, I mean, different kinds of fears. And if we understood those, you know, and told the politicians to go away for a while, then, you know, maybe we could get back to some kind of peace and equilibrium. I mean, I know that sounds like a huge, you know, that's like,
Well, that being said, how does your beautiful book, Where Madness Lies, how does it prepare us, help us for the potential futures? I mean, like we talked about just a minute ago, it's just open. When we become closed-minded, we die with the 3D world. When we live in infinite possibility, then infinite possibility just swirls around in the pool. Dive in the pool from earlier.
right,
And
right.
so, how does your beautiful book prepare us for a new way?
Um, Again, I mean, I think it's partly the openness, but the other piece that I think is really important and is the self-reflection and being honest with yourself, being, you know, and especially with the grandmother's character, you know, forgiveness of what she didn't do anything wrong, but she felt guilty and, you know, horrible, and just being able to really self-reflect and forgive yourself and forgive others.
Tell me about the illustrations in your book. What is?
So at the end of the book, there are pictures, and they are of the actual people in the book. My grandmother and my grandmother's sister and their mother and the home they lived in Germany. They were very wealthy before they fled. And I think that it's important. They give another sort of layer of depth, and I hope they help the reader connect on yet another level. I mean, hopefully my words are vivid enough that you can picture, but you know how when you're reading a book and then you see the pictures, well, you know what it's like. I mean, it gives you that added layer of connected.
Well, that brings me to being a musician full time. When I was 15, 16 years old and I wanted to be in a rock band and be a rock star, I would listen to the album, right? We're talking about vinyl, 12 inch,
Yeah.
whatever. And I listened to the album. Now, one of my favorites was Styx. And I'm listening to Grand
Oh,
Illusion or whatever. I'm digging it, right? Too early to smoke. But anyway, just digging the music. And then I pull out this big old album, and they only give you one picture of the band. Everything is mystery. It's like I have to engage to understand and use their music as a catalyst to sort of see what it's like to be, you know, hanging out with your icon. So I know about illustration. It's multi-layered. So what would you like to offer us as a final teaching tool? Something you can share that we can apply that would help us to understand you, that we can use to just kind of do just that, just better the future by the past.
I have a couple things in mind, so I'm trying to, like, in my head, I'm like
Take your
ABC.
time.
multiple choice test, which one should be. I'm going to go with this one, that I was taught, that the perfection is the enemy of the good. And the reason I'm going with that is obviously, there's a whole history of, needing to be perfect in my family that sort of came from the whole regime of the Nazis. But it's also something I like to teach my students, because in this idea that you can always be perfect, you get so obsessed, you forget that the good is really good. So, I mean, I think that it's okay to make mistakes. It's great to be open, and it's good to forgive yourself. That was a lot of messages. I think I picked all of the above for my multiple choice test.
Give us an announcement, please, if you would, where we can find your work. I have been posting in the forum, both of them, tonight. Where you're able to say anything else you want to add other than your Facebook and or where to buy your book and your website. Anything, any other platforms or whatever?
No, just you can Google and find this great interview with Keith Blanchard.
You're lovely. Thank you. I had a great time falling in. What's that, babe?
It's so different now with like Google. You can just, type in a name and you'll come up with 100 bookstores and.
I've seen the manifestation of the internet, or I see it. In fact, it's just so obvious to me that the internet is truly a manifestation of God. Because if God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and omnipresent, Google is everywhere. You can find anything in the form of information. Knowledge is power. I mean, it's simply a manifestation of all that. Thank you for joining me on Center of Light Radio. You're always welcome here. And actually, I would like to do a show soon, more on the paranormal side of you, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. I have great.
It seems like, and I get it, but it seems like, this is kind of a field for you that you would like to dabble in a little more, and I would love to give you that platform.
Oh, I've written the first draft of the paranormal sort of excursions.
You have a
medium hunter. I'm the medium hunter.
Do you have a make-do name for the book, or that you want to share? Is it too soon?
It's probably too soon, because right now it's called the Medium Hunter.
The Medium Hunter.
I'm not sure, depending on this, how, well, no, I think you write more. I think you've got a gift that I don't have with writing. For me, it takes a long time to really find the structure, and I'm not sure how I'm going to structure it yet.
My first one took me a year. I vesseled the messages.
Right.
And I did still write the next 7 years, but I had to live the principles that I was receiving in the first year to ever have anything that was solid at all. It took me 8 years to bring it from "Hello, Keith, time to wake up" to publication date.
Yeah.
The second one about my journey to India took me 14 and a half years. Not because it took that long, because I just didn't work in it that much.
Well,
so,
that's like me. I mean, like you do so many other things, like, it sort of gets plopped together. But anyway.
Come back and see us.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed my time with you.
And thank you for writing your amazing book.
Really. You're lovely. Everyone, Sylvia True tonight. We've been speaking about her new release, Where Madness Lies. So it's good to see you. Center of Light Radio. I love hanging out with beautifully sexy human creatures, divine souls. I'm talking directly to you. I'm looking at my software, engaging something. You are loved beyond measure. Until you understand, realize that, integrate that, graduate into that, you will have difficulty simply by choice. You're always choosing consciously or not. Get into the moving stream. Merrily, 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 life becomes a dream. Believe me when I tell you. I'm looking. You're loved beyond measure.
Okay. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. that you? Oh, wait, is that you singing though? Okay. Am I supposed to be muted? I just like, feel like I have to. Oh my God. And I know I'm not supposed to swear, right?